This is DawgNation Game Day, brought to you by Kroger, R.S. Andrews, UGA Bookstore, Sir Chero's, J. Stein Law Firm, and Jittery Joe's Coffee. Here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
DawgNation, at the beginning of the season, they told us it wasn't going to be enough. The strength of schedule was no good. Georgia's coming in, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. They're not going to be the same team that they have been as the back-to-back national champions. Well, Jeff Sentell, I'm Kaylee Mansell. Here we are. We are at the SEC Championship where Georgia comes in undefeated, facing a familiar foe that they haven't had such good luck with here in Atlanta, but we got to give all credit to the Dogs. Everybody was against us, proved them wrong, and here we are, and hopefully going to have the opportunity to show everyone today that they have been wrong since day one. Jeff, I told Brandon this earlier when we were filming that I didn't sleep last night. I couldn't sleep. Now, guys, Jeff is my therapist, so I tell him everything. He knows that I have problems being able to sleep through the night anyway, but usually it's feelings of anxiousness. Last night it was excitedness. I just couldn't wait for the day to get here. Is there any other game like the SEC Championship, Jeff?
There's nothing really like it, and it's so funny. You know, one thing, Kaylee, I think I said this earlier this week, that everybody talking about that there's a curse with Bama. Now, listen, I'm in the business of creating compelling headlines and making people want to click, but I just don't buy that. There's such a thing as liquid courage. I know a lot of people that are around us here today at the tailgate know all about. I think Georgia's gotten game film courage in terms of what they've done with Alabama. I think beating them in Lucas Oil Stadium, I think that was the monkey off the back. I think that was the victory. And then you sustain that next year when they go and win out and win convincingly. The way they've looked this year, taking on every challenge. I don't think the crimson and white and the colors and Saban and Alabama is going to be the problem. The problem is just winning the football game and playing better than Alabama today.
So we have a very different atmosphere today. If you were with us last week, you know that Jeff Sentell and I were on the front of the enemy lines getting screamed at by Georgia Tech fans. But this time we're surrounded by friends and supporters of the Georgia Bulldogs here at the DawgNation tailgate right in front of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I would much rather be with this crowd right here. Jeff, how awesome is it to be surrounded by so many fans of DawgNation and people who are striving for a common goal today?
First of all, one of the things we do when we're on scene is we try to give you like sights and sounds. First of all, Georgia Tech fans in that program wouldn't know how to get to a conference championship game. And while I was walking down Northside Drive here, I must admit, and Brandon didn't script this up for me, and I'm not doing this to make all the Gator haters out there happy, but probably one of the saddest things I saw was I saw a family of four, and they were all Florida fans, and they were all dressed out in their blue and orange, and they were here at the SEC Championship. I was like, a little odd, and they're like, well, we bought the tickets, we believed, so we're here. How bad is it to be a Florida fan around all these Dogs and around all these Crimson Tide fans? And that must be like the ultimate misery in terms of suffering to come here to the SEC Championship when Florida can't even make a bowl game.
Well, you do have to give them some credit, though. To come out here in blue and orange and face defeat from everyone, we've got to give them some props.
They must be 1%ers because we know the get-in price for this game is $636 per ticket, and they must not have needed to flip those tickets for some Christmas funds underneath the stocking, because for them to do that, I thought it was highly interesting.
Speaking of highly interesting, we have a very interesting show on hand for you today. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to touch on Alabama a little bit. I know you guys are diehard fans. You already know what the drill is, but we've got some things to tell you. We're going to do our injury report because there's a lot of questions in the air today. What's going to happen to Rob Thomas? Is Ladd McConkey going to play? What's the status of Brock Bowers, Tate Ratledge? We don't know that much. I like to be honest with you guys, but we're going to tell you everything that we do know and other possibilities in case maybe they don't hit the field today. We're also going to do our impact players. Jeff submitted some really good ones. We're going to hear from Tim Tebow. We're going to have an interview with Jake Fromm. Yeah,
there you go.
Who I was so nervous to meet yesterday. I told him my name twice. Then we're going to do your Sentell's Intel. We're going to have our keys to the game. We're going to hear a little clip on Reese Davis, and then we're going to wrap up, tell you all the things that you need to know before the SEC Championship begins. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our fast facts about Alabama. Wow. All right, guys, 11-1 on the year, lost a really early game to Texas. And I think what's interesting is ranked 8th in the college football playoff ranking again. Lost to Texas, had big wins over Ole Miss and LSU. How far has Alabama come since that Texas loss, Jeff?
Well, I think they've changed the way they play. First of all, it's kind of odd to think that the quarterback, Jalen Milroe, who's played great, even though he tried to give himself the Heisman last week after the Auburn game, but at one point this season he was benched. Over the summer and in the spring, after spring practice, Nick Saban and Tommy Rice gave the ultimate vote of no confidence. They went and pulled another quarterback out of the portal to try and stabilize that position. I think the thing that they've done is they've gotten Milroe the ability to, climb up into the pocket, not run so much on first instinct, and he's gone from getting sacked 4 times a game to only 1 time per game. The offense is much more efficient. They figured out what they can and cannot do, and Jalen's gotten a little bit more comfortable. We all know the more you play, the better you play. He's a big athlete. He's like a big tailback back there. Kirby Smart, of all people, compared him to Lamar Jackson with that ultra-hip Madden video game reference right there. I mean, he speaks recruiting 24/7.
And when you take a look at their all-time record versus Georgia, one of the only teams that has a hold on Georgia, 42-26-4. Last time we met, obviously, in the 2021 National Championship where Georgia won. And then Alabama, here's the thing. This is the stat of the day that everybody's going to talk about. All the Bama fans are going to put out. I'm going to have to do it even though I know they know it. Georgia in the Kirby Smart era has never beaten Alabama in Atlanta. Is that a surprise to you, considering this is almost like a second home field for us?
Yeah, but it's only like a pretty small sample size of 3 games. The other thing is the other thing to consider there is you caught Alabama at the zenith of its dynasty, where Georgia was just kind of climbing up. And now I think the roles are reversed. Alabama is trying to climb back to the mountain. Georgia knocked them off the mountain, as David Pollack so accurately described last year in the national championship pregame show. I think that's the difference. I think you've got a fully built, fully realized Georgia right now. And, I thought you were going to hit me with another stat. I thought you were going to hit me with that stat that Alabama is 16-0 in Atlanta since losing the 2008 SEC championship game. Like, they've never lost in the Benz ever. Yeah. And that's some more juju that makes Georgia fans right now reach for either some more antacid or some more game film, or maybe some more liquid courage.
At this point, it feels like the rivalry is a tale as old as time, but this time the stakes are a little bit different because Alabama is coming in as the underdog. And Georgia in the past, it's kind of been like, well, you don't really have anything to lose because you're already expected to lose. Does that make you nervous at all today, knowing that the tables have really turned?
Yeah, I think everybody's worried about the playoffs right now. They want to see, like, Florida State, who's going to play after this game, go down. What if Iowa beats Michigan? I think everybody's worried about the playoff and can Georgia get in if the Tide pulls the stunner. I think that's where most of the worries are at. And for me, I'm going to tell you this. This is one of the things I was thinking when I was driving up today. This is the last time Georgia and Alabama will play this year. Georgia wins. They're going to move on. If Alabama wins, maybe Georgia gets into the playoffs and sees them again. But the big thing to think about, Kaylee, is I'm always thinking ahead, thinking forward. Next year, do you know Georgia and Alabama could play 3 times? Count along with me. You can use your fingers and toes. They could play in the regular season game. They could play in the SEC championship game. And then they could go get each other in the 12-team playoff. I don't like that.
Me either.
Everybody says, you can't beat a good team twice. Well, try being a good team 3 times. Can you imagine if Georgia beat Alabama twice next year, regular season SEC championship game, and then they face them again in the playoffs and Bama gets the most important win, kind of like what Georgia did in 2021? That's the one thing of the playoffs I don't really like. And you could see that again with Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten. They can play in the regular season, they can play in the conference title game, and then they can play in the playoffs.
There's been so much commotion about potential playoff contenders. It's never been this wide open. It really hasn't. But we're going to focus on the game at hand today between Alabama and Georgia. Hopefully at least one, if not 2 teams will be able to enter into the college football playoff. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our Alabama Crimson Tide impact players, starting with none other than quarterback Jalen Milroe, who has 12 rushing touchdowns on the year, which is first for all SEC quarterbacks. Now, this was a guy who, at the beginning of the season, wasn't playing how the fan base really wanted. They wanted somebody else, and then they kind of realized, oh, crap, he's the only one that we have. And now, in recent games, all of a sudden, Jalen Milroe has become this, like, generational, once-in-a-lifetime type quarterback. Where did the shift really happen, Jeff? I
think they kept winning. He kept putting up kind of big explosives. Listen, I don't know, and I'm going to be honest, I need to see Jalen Milroe face a top 10 defense and carve them up. And that means with his arms. That means the underneath stuff. That means the breaking in and breaking out routes. I need to see him execute a 12-play, 80-yard drive with his arm. I haven't seen that yet because a lot of the highlights show from Milroe, and there's a lot of explosives. But you see him going over the top of the coverage, and then you see him running around like nobody can catch him. And really, he's a glorified tailback at 6'3" and 240 pounds.
And what were your thoughts on 4th and 31 last week?
You got to rush more than two guys. You can't give them that big of a cushion. I mean, listen, I tell you one thing. If Georgia's faced with that same situation with Bama and 4th and 31, he's going to have some heat, and he's going to have to shrug a couple of Bulldogs off of his back in order to make that throw. Either that or he's going to have to run it 31 yards in, because the one thing you don't do in a situation like that is give a guy all that time to make a read and to wait for one of his guys to come open. At some point, that was like 7-on-7 football, and Jalen Milroe, they only give you 4 seconds to throw in 7-on-7, but Milroe had about 8 seconds there.
Well, it wouldn't be the impact players list if we didn't mention, maybe some might call him the one who got away, wide receiver Jermaine Burton, who was a transfer from Georgia. He's averaging almost 23 yards per reception, which leads the SEC currently. What dynamic does Burton bring to this Alabama offense?
Great kid, great worker, great ball skills. I know Dog fans are a little delicate about how they feel about Jermaine Burton because of the transfer, but this was a guy that was initially going to go to LSU. He moved away. Terrence Edwards trained him everything he knows. He has remarkable ball skills. You wanted to see Burton prosper a little bit more than he has at Alabama to kind of verify the reason why he chose the Tide. But he's going to be a tough matchup. I think Bond presents a tough matchup. That's why I think, one of our Dog Nation cover fours this week, Kaylee, we had about the Dogs most necessary and most vital to come back. We got some people doing shots over here to my left. The most vital was a guy like Julian Humphrey. That's a guy, could he play today? Maybe. Could he play next week? I think so. But Humphrey is a guy, we talked about explosive players and dynamic players. I think this game is going to be decided by diffusive players. I mean, guys that diffuse those explosive offensive players. And I think Julian Humphrey is one of those guys. When I look at Julian, number 12, I see not only Georgia's probably number 2 corner, but I see a future first-round cornerback. He has everything. He has the size. He has the top-end speed. Georgia has given him a lot more physicality from where he was a year ago. And, I really see a guy, Julian, that's going to go to the league as a first-round pick out of Georgia. And you need those guys on the field to slow down Alabama.
And the last impact player I have for the Crimson Tide, a guy that I know you know very well. We had the opportunity to watch him in his high school years. I had to go with Caleb Downs, who's 95 total tackles, 4th in the SEC, a true freshman. It's amazing to me how talented he is already, especially to come into a program like Alabama where they tend to develop players. You don't really see the field as a true freshman. Caleb Downs is a one-of-a-kind type of player. What impact do you expect him to make today for the Tide?
So one of the things they teach you in TV school is when you want to make your point, even though you got an hour show, you make it very simply. And I think Caleb Downs is the best safety prospect I've ever seen. I had someone tell me this summer that's connected to the Alabama staff is they did an internal auditing of their best players, their best 10 players, and Caleb Downs was already one of those best 10 players this summer before he played any football. And I really think he's a guy that he is their Malachi Starks, and that's as simply as I can say it.
And with that, we will make that our fast facts about Alabama. As I mentioned to you guys earlier, didn't get much sleep last night. The reason that I am going today is I had 2 cups of Jittery Joe's coffee. I had my K-Cups, 2 cups. I'm a 2-cup girl, sometimes 3, depending on the day. And even though we don't have any more shows at Jittery Joe's anymore, they're still in our heart. They're still a great sponsor of the show, so we have to give them a shout out. And you'll see people walking around today with the Go for 3 and 23 shirts on. Jittery Joe's is going to have some awesome commemorative cans come out. If you want to look at the ones they already have for their 2021 and 2022 national championship years, make sure to check out their website. Or if you couldn't make it to Atlanta today and you're still in Athens, check out Jittery Joe's. Now, this is the one everybody's been waiting on, Jeff. We've got to do our injury report. And I know that we don't know a whole lot, but you can check out Connor Riley's article this morning on the updated injury report. As of now, this is where it stands.
Hold on, guys. Quick question. I want you guys to bet in the comment section. Will Kaylee's injury report for this game for the Dogs be shorter or longer than Freebird? Weigh in right now in the comment section because she's got a lot to talk about.
I hope it's shorter than Freebird. We have a lot to get to.
I know, but that's a long injury report.
All right,
man.
So here's what I know. I'm going to tell you guys everything I know. Brock Bowers, probable. Tate Ratledge, probable. Ladd, questionable. Rah, questionable. Now, I don't want to get your hopes up, but I did see a piece of information this morning, and I don't know how much this is going to contribute, but when the PA at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this morning was practicing names, practicing the starting lineups, all 4 of those guys were mentioned. All 4 names were practiced on the intercom. Jeff, is that a good sign, or am I just stupid?
That's Mansell intel right there.
Oh, I've never said that.
You like that? And you're rhyming today, too. You said shows at Joe's. You got bars today. But I think that's great. We know maybe they're practicing 2 things. Maybe that's Kirby Smart. Maybe saying, hey.
Mind games.
Option A, option B. Read this one when all the media is here. They're going to give it a go. I think the best thing I can say about Ladd is he's going to give it a go. What that means, a lot of players will take painkillers. They'll take shots in order to get ready to play. That's pretty common for a big game like this. And Ladd's going to walk out there. He's going to give everything himself he needs to be ready to play. And the back and the ankle and everything else is either going to say green light, yellow light, or red light. And he's going to try. And, I mean, that's just the way it is for a lot of those guys. You know, sneaky injury report stuff. I mentioned Julian Humphrey before. I wonder how far away Jamon Dumas-Johnson is from playing as well. It's been a while. That would be a big pickup for the Dogs as well.
Yeah, as of right now, Jamon Dumas-Johnson is a guaranteed out. Julian Humphrey is doubtful. Smile Munden, probably a guy that we haven't talked about. How big would it be to have Smile Munden back in this game?
He's going to go. I think he's tried to play most of the year at 75 to 85%. They need it. I mean, folks, I'm going to tell you, there's going to be stretches. Get used to it. Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen are going to be there at backer, and that's going to be what you're going to deal with. I mean, these are very talented players, and the more seasoning they get in a game like this, the better it is for 2024 and 2025. Look for a name like Damon Wilson maybe to maybe rise to the occasion here with some pass rush because, I mean, really the objective will be eventually to get Milroe on the ground.
Well, as mentioned before, it looks like we're definitely going to at least see Brock Bowers and Tate Ratledge on the field today. What do you think would be the overall reaction of Georgia fans if we did not see Ladd McConkey on the field?
I think it's guarded. I think, you know, Georgia's found a way to operate without Ladd. Reminder, Dylan Bell is playing as well as any Georgia receiver right now. If you own Dylan Bell stock, you got Kaylee sitting there doing that right now, like she's listening to her favorite song right now. But I like Dylan Bell. I think he's a worthy, adequate weapon for Carson Beck as well. I thought you were going to say Brock Bowers, and if Brock Bowers doesn't trot out there, then I think everybody's going to go to the bar and get a double in the middle of the game.
Hey, well, at least we know that Brock Bowers isn't going to have to go get an immediate drug test like he did after the 2021 National Championship with Alabama. Guys couldn't even celebrate with the team in the locker room. They made him go get a drug test right then and there. I saw something about that last night. I knew I had to include it in there today. So if you took the under on injury report that it wasn't going to be as long as Freebird, then you need to be paid up. That was our J-Sign injury report, J-Sign Law Firm. Guys, you never know when something's going to happen. So if you or someone that you love or was hurt because someone did something wrong, look no further than our friends at J-Stein Law Firm. Josh Stein, a double dog, graduated from UGA, and then, of course, went to UGA Law School, and he's got that firm that's going to give you the attention that you need, the best customer service, the one-on-one time that you need to help build your case. So make sure that when it happens, because as I said, you never know when it's going to, make sure to check out our friends at J. Stein Law Firm. And with that, we are going to go into our impact players today. Now, usually I get Jeff to send me 3, but there have been a few exceptions today.
Have there? Wow.
There have. Jeff sent me some 2-for-1 specials, and because it's the SEC Championship and I've been excited all week, I decided that I could probably move some graphics around, make some things happen, because there's a lot of guys today that are going to matter on the field. But we're going to start with our lone wolf here. This is Amarius Mims, a leader, not just on the field, but off the field as well. So well respected. How important is his role at the line of scrimmage today?
So first of all, there's a lot of things going on with Mount Mims. Number one is he's got to keep Carson clean, allow Carson Beck time to cook. But the other thing is he's got a tremendous draw when Dallas Turner is going to line up on his side and come after Carson. That Dallas is a future first rounder. Amarius is a future first rounder. That's what Georgia and Alabama is. It's a guy going to the league, playing against another guy going to the league. Both of those guys were former 5-stars. And for Carson to be wonderful, like he has been the whole season, 72% completions, he needs time to operate. Although he's getting the ball out in 2.4 seconds because he's got like a Pentium, old school Pentium chip processor in his head. He really gets that ball out quick. And I think Mims would be a big reason why. Mims is auditioning against Alabama today for first round tape, for top 15 tape. So that is going to be one very motivated Bulldog at 6 feet, 8 inches, and about 330 pounds.
And moving on to your next impact players, I should say, let's do the running back duo of Kendall Milton and Dajon Edwards. I feel like Kendall Milton is playing his best ball right now. It couldn't have come at a better time. Mike Griffith even told me the other day he thinks his dark horse prediction for the SEC MVP is going to be Kendall Milton. Why are the running backs so important in this particular game?
So it's the evolution of the Georgia offense. You remember a couple years ago, my buddy Brandon Adams was like dreaming like a schoolgirl crush for a 1,000-yard receiver, and he wanted Georgia to have that type of passer that Carson Beck is now, a guy that throws the ball all around, 350 yards per game. My pick is probably Carson there for the SEC game MVP, but what Georgia does now is you have to worry about Georgia offensive threats, vertical threats, passing game threats, and then it makes Georgia football line of scrimmage so much more effective with Kendall and with Dajon Edwards. I mean, really, folks, you got to face it. If you don't think Kendall Milton is playing the best football of his Georgia career right now, then you haven't been watching the Dogs closely enough.
It's just crazy to think that at the beginning of the season, we basically started out with no running backs, and now we have two back at full health. How different is this team with both of those guys at 100%?
He's really, I mean, the thing is, people make business decisions with Kendall. I don't know if you guys, most of the Georgia fans I know, they rewatch games over and over and over during the week. And if you watch closely to that Tech game, there were some guys going like, I got to come out after tackling Kendall. He is big. He's lumbering. He's behind his pads. He's got some gaping holes, as we saw recently. And he's playing with a lot of confidence. And this is a young man who absolutely loves Georgia and burns for Georgia. And I think it's great how he's elevating his legacy at Georgia, also elevating his NFL draft stock game by game by game, kind of like what he did last year. And somehow this injury issue he had earlier in the year has allowed him to be fresh for the stretch run.
And now we're going to take a look at the defensive side of the ball with our impact players. Again, another 2-for-1 special. Malachi Starks, Javon Bullard. I mean, it just really doesn't get any better than that for the Dogs.
That's good. And, I mean, you know the guys that are going to defuse what I talked about earlier, Alabama's explosive players? Well, that's Malachi and Bull, because sooner or later, Malachi is either going to get Jalen Milroe. He's going to deke him into throwing a ball he doesn't want him to throw, that Jalen doesn't want to throw, or – like last week against Tech, did you see Singleton break away free?
Yeah.
A guy with great 100-meter speed, super fast guy, and Malachi hawked him down and stopped a touchdown, stopped a house call. So Malachi's a guy that the best athlete Georgia has on defense, sooner or later is going to be matched up. And then I mentioned Javon Bullard as an ultimate diffuser. You know what that means? Remember how Marvin Harrison Jr. was going off last year for Ohio State? Well, the Bull came in and really defused the explosive ability of the Ohio State offense with a big shot, some big plays, and some interceptions. I predict, everybody loves predictions in a pregame show, right? You couldn't be anywhere without, that's like a tailgate without any barbecue, right? But you couldn't have one of those. I got one. Malachi or Bullard have one. Those two get at least one interception today.
I'll take that.
You take that one?
I'll take that.
There you go.
A Bullard interception would be nice today.
That would.
I would like to see it.
I mean, Bullard's a guy that you look at the last two games he played in of this magnitude. Those were the college football playoffs. Defensive MVP against Ohio State, defensive MVP against TCU, and now he's got Alabama again. And that answer he gave after the Georgia Tech game, hope Georgia folks saw that. He's like, I want to win an SEC championship. I want to win the SEC championship. And that young man from Milledgeville, Baldwin High School, he's got that GA red clay in his blood. That's why he wants to win this game.
And we're going to wrap up our impact players here with none other than Carson Beck. Carson Beck, at one point, an Alabama commit, came over to, I want to say the dark side, but I feel like we're the light. Alabama might be the dark in this case. So came over to Georgia. Here he is, a big full circle moment. It feels like he's going to go face Alabama today. And here's the thing. I feel like Carson's presence is being overshadowed by Jalen Milroe in a sense, especially after the way that the Iron Bowl ended last week with the 4th and 31 call. I feel like every conversation that's been had in the national media this week is all about how is Milroe going to play? How is Milroe going to play? Well, it feels like the conversation with Beck hasn't been started enough. We haven't seen him get much recognition for the Heisman. That's kind of out of the question now. But for me, I think he comes into this game today ready.
I think Carson, let's say Carson dials up 27 out of 38, 322, 2 TDs, no picks, 3 TDs, no picks. He suddenly has the best quarterback resume of everybody. Penix is probably going to be in New York. because he's part of an unbeaten team. Bo Nix will probably be in New York, but he's not going to win it because he lost his 2 biggest games. But all of a sudden you have Carson continuing to play well on the biggest stages. And I really think, Kaylee, if he has an MVP-type performance tonight, he can get an invitation to New York for that with a brilliant game tonight.
Well, speaking of Carson Beck resume, I actually made a little graphic here for you guys. It's called Battle for the Bins, and it's going to compare the stats between Milroe and Beck. There's some things on there I'm going to explain to you. Let's start with passing yards per game. Obviously, Carson leads the way, a little over 290, and Jalen Milroe right at 229. Clearly, Milroe's strength over Carson is that he is more mobile on the ground. He is able to create that kind of space and be able to scramble and get out of situations. He's almost averaging 40 rushing yards per game versus Carson, who's pushing 11. Now, you'll see here where I have touchdowns. You'll see the plus sign in the middle. The first number represents how many passing touchdowns they throw, and the second number represents the rushing touchdowns. I wanted you guys to be able to see the difference. Both have 6 interceptions on the year, but Carson Beck leads the way, and completion percentage was 72%. That is what our quarterback battle was going to look like today. And then yesterday, I actually got the chance to go to the media availability at the World Congress Center, where Tim Tebow came down and spoke to us. And when asked about how impressed Tebow had been with Carson's development, he made a really good point that a guy like Carson, a first-year starter, the reason that he's come into this season and has developed so quickly and really improved is he's been playing against the best defenses for the last 3 years. So he's prepped. I don't want to spoil too much, but I want you guys to hear what Tim Tebow had to say about Carson Beck yesterday.
Well, I think it says a couple of things. One is that he's an incredible young man, and I think, too, it says that what they do in practice is really good at Georgia. That, when I've had the chance to sit down and talk with him, you understand that all the practices against those defenses the last couple of years was probably as hard, if not harder, than what he's experienced this year. And that's real. And when I just think that has prepared him, that when he's, his first games, and asking him, all right, your first SEC game and you're down South Carolina. Yeah, but I know who I practiced against over and over again. That creates a confidence when you know that a lot of really good players in the NFL are the guys that you've gone against the last few years. I think it's built his confidence, and he's shown it. And it's been just really fun to watch his maturity and him playing at such a high level.
And that was Tim Tebow on Carson Beck yesterday at the World Congress Center here in Atlanta, where they're hosting Dr. Pepper SEC Fanfare. Jeff, do you believe that to be true? Is that part of the reason maybe why Carson's got this calm presence and he's got a strong mental mind because of the Georgia defenses he's had to practice against in the past?
Certainly. You're talking about, 15 future NFL guys. Like 8 of them are already in the NFL. And if you can move the ball on those guys with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Trayvon Walker and Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean and Keely Ringo and Darian Kendrick and on and on and on, Lewis Seen. I mean, that's a ton of players right there. So this is the way Georgia's so great. I talked a minute ago, I maybe made Kaylee process a little bit. She was like jaw drop a little bit.
Mental reset
because kind of like the TriCaster in your head went down or something like that. But what happens there is like you have a situation where you're playing. Kirby Smart wants the games to be easier than practices. And really, we've heard those viral clips of those locker room leaks about, that's nothing to be worried about. Go out there and bust their bleep up, because he's designed his practices with his defensive linemen, future NFL guys, with his linebackers, with his corners, with his safeties. That challenge each and every week on those Bloody Tuesdays or in fall camp is greater than what they will see on Saturdays.
Well, speaking of locker room leaks, Jeff, locker room leaks, yeah, say that 10 times fast. I had a great conversation with Jake Fromm the other night. I tried to get him to spill some tea on if he remembered the conversation in the pregame speech that Kirby gave them before they went to the SEC Championship. Of course, things that were appropriate and can be said on our live broadcast here, but I want you guys to see the full interview with Jake. He helped us break down all things SEC Championship, Kirby's speeches, and what it's like to be a quarterback playing in the SEC Championship. So with that, here is Jake Fromm right now. Former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, you may have seen him on DawgNation Daily, but he is treating us tonight and is joining us for our DawgNation Game Day show. Wanted to get some intel from Jake about what it's like to play in the SEC Championship, the pressure around it. So Jake, I want to go to you first because you've played in the SEC championship twice. You've been on both the losing and the winning side. But in regards to the Georgia-Alabama rivalry in the SEC championship, how has the narrative and the conversation around the game changed since you were in school?
Yeah, I mean, first off, just the SEC championship is just it's such a big game. You're coming fresh off the season, and it's a normal week to go into work and prepare for this game. But really, in our eyes and our minds, anytime we played in it, I mean, we felt like this was the national championship game. Like the two best teams in the country are going to go play it out, battle it out, and slug it out for 4 quarters. You knew mentally that you had to prepare for a 4-quarter game. Just emotionally, you just knew this game was just going to take a lot out of you. It's going to be a roller coaster of a game, the ups and downs. Knew this game is going to be a little bit longer. The TV timeouts and commercials always take so much longer. And then when you get to the stadium, too, just the atmosphere is electric. And it's just a fun time, and it's a blessing to play in those big-time games.
So one thing you touched on with Brandon Adams during DawgNation Daily the other day was how Mercedes-Benz is a little bit different than playing at Sanford or playing on the road. So I just want you to reiterate, is there anything different itself about playing in the stadium, whether it's the atmosphere? Now, I understand it's the same amount of yards on the field, but just is there anything different about the feeling when you walk into Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah, Mercedes-Benz offers just a very unique playing experience. You get an NFL-type feel to it. For a quarterback, we're trying to find, hey, where's my shot clock at? Let me look at the clocks. Let me try to figure out where the score's at, the timeouts, all that good stuff that you would like to know, all that good information that you need to know. And then, too, the crowd, it's 50-50 usually, us dogs, and we have great fans. And so we usually have a little bit more than the other team did. But it ends up being super, super loud in that stadium. The train's always bumping, always rolling in Mercedes-Benz. And going to the playing surface and the turf, I always felt like the turf played a little bit faster. So the game's the best of the best. It's going to be a fast and quick game, and up to us as quarterbacks to make great, quick decisions.
And you do have a unique perspective being a quarterback, and then you take a look at somebody like Carson Beck, whose development this season has just been through the roof. But when you think back to your SEC championships, did you feel any sort of extra pressure being the quarterback?
Oh, yeah, for sure. All eyes are always on you when you play quarterback. Every decision you make will be second guess, so to speak, or checked on, and even more so in these kind of games. Every throw counts in these games, and even throwaways too, right? Yeah. Throwing the ball away sometimes is a smart play, checking the ball down, but everybody's going to be watching and waiting for you to hit some really good throws, and you're going to need those throws, especially late in the game when they count.
So I do have to ask you, playing under Kirby Smart, now we've only heard Kirby's leaked pregame speeches, postgame speeches, probably for good reason. Do you remember Kirby's message to y'all before both SEC championships? At least things that you can say on air.
Yeah, not word for word. There's a few words that I wouldn't really like to say. But no, Coach always brings it. He always gets the guys just fired up, gets our blood boiling a little bit. It's exactly what we need and when we need it. So Coach has always had a really good knack for those pregame speeches. As you guys have heard, it feels the way for us, if not more. Like we get fired up for it because we're ready to go than you guys do.
So as a former player, coming from your perspective, obviously you know that Georgia has not beaten Alabama in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So if they were to do that Saturday, amongst all the notable games that they've had over the last 3 years, where would a win against Alabama in Mercedes-Benz Stadium rank for all-time great Georgia wins?
Yeah, like on one hand, I'm stuck at, hey, it's a game against a good opponent. Like where it's at shouldn't matter. But I think it does in a little bit of the sense of, hey, I still count playing in Mercedes-Benz as a home game for me. So I think it playing on my home turf, man, I should be wanting to protect this turf the best I can. And so for me, I do think that'll be a big time win. Where it ranks, I couldn't exactly tell you. But I know it'll mean a lot for obviously those people in the building, and then a lot too for fans around the country.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You do such a great job on DawgNation Daily. We just had to have you for the Game Day show, so I appreciate your time.
Yeah, Kaylee, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jake. And that was Jake Fromm on all things SEC Championship. And Jake, like Carson, was also at one point committed to Alabama before coming to the Dogs. And so we're going to get our Sentell's intel. It's my personal favorite part of the show because you never know what Jeff has to say. This is a man who holds so much knowledge in here. You never know what he's going to spit out. And since this isn't a home game, we're not hosting recruits, I don't think, okay?
Can't have recruits on the game like that.
Okay, I just wanted to double check, make sure I had my facts straight. But here's one thing that I do know about both teams. Alabama and Georgia are recruiting monsters. So not only do they get the most 5-star recruits, 4-star guys, they're also really good at finding the hidden gems of 3 stars. But as I mentioned, a lot of guys now are going to have to turn to the transfer portal. You're scrambling to get guys, but Alabama and Georgia are able to recruit the highest level of competition. And it really shows in games like today when they're playing here at the SEC Championship.
Yeah, so there was a great quote this week from Tyler Booker, Alabama All-American offensive lineman, regular starter for them. He said, everybody at Alabama at one time thought they were going to Georgia. And he said, everybody at Georgia, I bet at one time thought that they were going to choose Alabama. These two teams, unlike any others, maybe you can throw Ohio State in there. They don't recruit players, they select players. And that's a big difference. It's like, I'm not trying to woo this guy to pick me. Sometimes with these programs, a lot of times with these programs, they have their choice of the 5 best offensive linemen they want. The way these teams are different in the transfer portal era is they hold on to linemen and they get linemen. Except last year, Alabama team, another tell is they had to go to other places to find safeties from Tulane, offensive linemen from Vanderbilt. You know, Alabama, and they brought in Tresman Marshall from Georgia to become a starting linebacker. And Tresman was probably going to be second or third team at best for Georgia this year. So that stuff right there, when you see what a team goes shopping for in the offseason, that shows where they're weak and where their depth issues are pretty low.
I think one thing that's also important to mention is you guys got the opportunity to see the Milroe versus Beck slide. One thing that we didn't include on there, when you look back at their high school years, Carson Beck did win a state title with his high school team in Florida. Jalen Milroe did not. Carson Beck knows what it feels like to have the greatest achievement or accomplishment you could win at that level and that age. Milroe doesn't. So do you think that Milroe coming to this game has a bigger chip on his shoulder?
I don't know if it's chip. I think it's unknown. Because sometimes the answers to the test are really easy. If Jalen Milroe was a great 4-star, 5-star quarterback in Texas, but he never won it all. His senior season, I think they went 10-0 and then lost in the first round of the playoffs. What does that tell you? Well, quarterbacks ultimately are measured on how they perform in the win and how they win the big game or how they lead their team through the postseason. Carson, his junior year, took Mandarin High School to the first state title in school history, and he was named Mr. Football for Florida in the state's largest classification. So that's an example on Carson's resume where he's been in the most extreme championship-level pressure cooker, and he performed, and he dealed, and he rose to the occasion. Jalen Milroe, on the other hand, has never been able to say that I got it done, I led my team to a title. When you look for little things in a game like this, sometimes the recruiting trail and sometimes a player backstory will tell you a lot about what they're capable of and what they're already confident they can do.
He couldn't lead his team to a win over Texas either, who we can see here in the corner. If you guys need an update, Texas is up on Oklahoma State. Of course, it just goes off. I think it said 41-14. Texas with a pretty big lead here. And with that, we will make that our Sentell's Intel. Now it's time to go to our keys of the game. Again, if you didn't join us last week, Jeff sends me his keys through email as emoji coded. And you would think with me being the Gen Z member that I would be fluent in emojis. And I had some difficulty deciphering it, so Jeff's going to have to correct me. Here is Jeff's key, starting with the first one. Put the football down and stop it, Bama. Is that, it was like a red octagon. Okay, yeah.
So I believe the way Georgia beats Alabama is you don't beat Alabama so much as you break Alabama. And what that means, I think Carson Beck is going to throw the ball around and give Georgia a lead. And that point, Georgia's going to put the ball on the ground and say, stop us. We're coming right at you. man-style SEC line of scrimmage, and Georgia is going to move Bama out of their way. If you don't believe me, if that sounds like a cool little script for a romantic comedy, it's not. Or a great Friday Night Lights movie, it's not. The series is so much better. But what I'm talking about, if you go back to the 2021 National Championship game, Georgia found the formula. They held a 1-point lead over Alabama, and Georgia put the ball on the ground. They got Jamari Salyer, they got Broderick Jones in there, and they ran 7 out of 8 plays. Zamir White, James Cook, Zamir White, James Cook. They moved Alabama off the line. They whipped them physically, and then the only throw was a touchdown pass to Brock Bowers on the final play of the drive. If you look at Alabama's front, I don't think they have defensive tackles, true defensive tackles. And I think there's going to come a point in this game where Georgia's going to put the ball on the ground, and they're going to say, stop it, Bama. And it's up to Bama. If they want to beat Georgia, they've got to stop Kendall Milton, and they've got to stop Dejon Edwards, and I don't think they can do it.
And moving on to your next key, you have make Jalen Milroe drive the field over and over. Now, guys, I realize that there is a typo here, but just like Alabama's regular season record, I am not perfect, okay? I do my best. But, Jeff, you say make Jalen Milroe drive the field over and over. Why is this significant?
Yeah, I want to see Jalen Milroe, like we talked about earlier, make the right read, throw it in the right window over and over. And I want to see Jalen do it with his arm, not his legs, because those legs are not sustainable against athletes like Georgia. He's opened himself up to getting hit a lot, potential injuries, potential shoulders. One thing we know, and I want you everybody on the DawgNation channels to potentially say amen after this one. Every time these two teams play, there is a key guy that goes out, and the other team has to overcome it. Kirby Smart hinted at this, but remember, Jalen Hurts comes in, Tua Tagovailoa is knocked out, DeAndre Walker is knocked out for Georgia. It keeps going on and on where Georgia loses a premium piece, and they have to find a way to beat Bama regardless. And Alabama's done that a lot, the way they've came back against Georgia in the second halves, and I think that's going to be key. I just want to see Milroe. I think he's going to bust one. I think he's going to have a 30, 40-yard run, but I just don't think that's sustainable over a 4-quarter game.
And your final key is to keep feeding Dylan Bell the ball. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we couldn't have written up a better story for this Dylan Bell storyline. Just the dynamic that he brings, and he's really a do-it-all kind of guy. Is today a day where his gameplay thrives? I
think he's been soaring the last few weeks. I think Georgia might throw him in at running back for a change of pace. But, you know, if there's questions about Ladd, there's questions about Ra-Ra, I think you slide Dylan Bell up the depth chart and the food chain a little bit. And listen, this is a guy that looks ready for the big stage. I had to say one overlying statement about Georgia's team so far, Georgia's season so far, is that the attrition of the season has allowed Georgia to show a lot of depth. You know, you don't have Kendall Milton for the first of the year. You don't have Brock Bowers for a little bit. You don't have Ladd for a little bit. And what's happened is people have rotated and made plays. Kendall Milton stepped up the last couple of weeks. Dylan Bell has stepped up the last couple of weeks. I think the hardest thing for Georgia, everybody's going to have injuries when they have a 15-game schedule and everybody's taking the best shot. And I think that's why you need players that are really good enough and just scratching the surface when their number is called. A great football coach I know once told me, you need to have your players at their best when their best is required. And it seems like when Georgia has a man go down, the next man up has been making plays in practice against Georgia's all-world offense or all-world defense, and they're ready to perform.
Well, Jeff, you are not the only one who had praises to sing for Dylan Bell. Yesterday I had a chance to talk to Reese Davis of College Gameday, and I asked him, when you look at the beginning of the season to where they're at now, what is the one thing about the Georgia Bulldogs that surprised you most? Here's what Reese Davis had to say about that.
Once again, I think growth and winning a different way. I mean, this defense is still really, really good. But the last 2 years, all those guys are playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, I mean, they're not as good as they were the last couple of years. They're still really good. That's not some kind of slide or insult. So instead, they just now cut you to pieces on offense with this explosive offense. And even when Brock Bowers has been hurt and Ladd McConkey's been out, they just find another weapon. I've been absolutely mesmerized watching Dylan Bell. Hand it to him, they let him throw it, they throw it to him. He's like a secret weapon that it's like when you have an emergency, break glass and use Dylan Bell. You know, I mean, he's so they've got so many weapons on offense, and Carson Beck is the epitome of what happens when you stay the course. Not unlike Milroe, but in a different way. Because Carson had a chance a couple years ago, and a lot of people in Georgia like to downplay this, but Carson had a chance to take over when JT Daniels got hurt. Didn't go as well as perhaps he would have hoped in practice that week, so they went to Stetson, and everybody knows what happened after that. A lot of guys would get discouraged after that or say, this is not for me, they're not handing me the reins. He just kept getting better. And now, man, he's a dude. I mean, he's an NFL quarterback. Now, I'll get ahead of this. Whatever they want to pay him, they should, and Carson should stay, in my judgment, because we've seen quarterbacks struggle who don't have a lot of starts. So come back, get probably 15 more starts, given Georgia's talent under your belt, and you might be QB1, next year. So I think he's just been terrific for them. He's put up numbers. I know he's probably not in the Heisman race this year, but he's put up numbers that are certainly worthy of being evaluated. And I think he's been with a lot of the Georgia fans got really upset with me because I didn't rank them preseason number 1. And all I said was, I want to see the quarterback play. I didn't think that was unreasonable. I've seen him. He's a dude. And, I think he's been terrific for them.
And that was Reese Davis on how impressed he's been with not only Carson Beck, but Dylan Bell. Jeff, I know you didn't get a chance to see the video. Maybe those at home picked up on it. It was like Reese Davis and I were in a staring contest. He did not break eye contact, not one time. It was like he was staring into my soul, Jeff. I was terrified.
What was in your soul at that moment? Have a good sound bite so I can have it on the tailgate show prior to the game?
Well, I was just hoping that my interaction with him went a little bit better than Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow asked me what my name is, and I just said, I'm good. I'm Kaylee. I'm good. So at that point, I was just really glad that it went better than my first time around, which we actually got on video. Maybe I'll share it one day. But this just
Are you saying Reese Davis is not as dreamy as Tim Tebow? Is that what you're
saying? No,
saying?
see, I actually think it's quite the opposite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like Tim Tebow's gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but like Reese Davis is a handsome man. I will give him that. But let's get to more important news. This just in. They will not be selling alcohol to general admission here in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Do you think that's going to have any effect on the overall mood and morale from these SEC fans?
I don't think it means more to the SEC means more to the fans at that game inside general admission. There's nothing worse than scraping together the cheddar and the cash to get into the SEC championship game and getting a seat and then telling you we're not going to serve you alcohol here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're just encouraging people to pregame harder, so then you have a bunch of people that, I don't know, I don't understand that. They don't really ask us for our opinions on these types of things.
Yeah.
But as we begin to wrap up, there's one thing I want to talk about with you, and that's the fact that we've been here before, familiar place, familiar foe, familiar stakes, but this time the tables have turned a little bit. Georgia is coming in with the advantage. Alabama is the underdog, and when you take a look at all the SEC championships that Georgia and Alabama have played in the past, what is it about this one that's so different?
Well, I mean, I guess it's the reversal about who's the contender and who's the champ. You know, you love the Ric Flair lines, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, Alabama's not the man in this matchup. They've got to try and beat Georgia. And, you know, we're getting tons of reports already coming in from the field, Georgia players going through warm-ups. Here's some highlights. Brock Bowers is out there. He's leading the tight ends through warm-ups. We all knew Captain America Brock Bowers was going to be able to answer the bell and go. Ladd McConkey was also out there as well. The one player we haven't seen so far is we haven't seen Ra Thomas out on the field with his foot working out. But if you could tell Georgia fans right now that sitting in the general admission, if you've got Brock Bowers and you've got Ladd McConkey today, I don't think they might need a drink for a while if you can give them that good news.
And if there's one thing, this is a big one. This is the SEC championship. I need your one thing to be really stellar, Jeff.
Stellar.
Stellar, in all caps.
Okay.
What would be the one thing that everybody at home needs to know about the game?
I think it's the national championship game.
I said the exact same thing earlier on Brandon's segment. This is the national championship game to me. I've been to a national championship. Nothing compares to this feeling right here. I know everybody at home is feeling it. I know that everyone around us is feeling it. We know that in the SEC it just means more, and it's because of games and rivalries like this.
I think it's what you're going to see and the way Alabama continues to recruit. I don't know if Nick Saban has – I was asking – some fans asked me that walking up to the tailgate today, is they said, we want to know about Saban. If we set the over-under on Saban with 3 more years as a college football head coach, would you take the over or the under? And I said, I'm taking the under. I might even take the under 2 more seasons. So while Georgia keeps taking off and building and ascending and climbing with Kirby, I think Alabama fans realize that these are kind of the fading embers, the last sparks of the Saban dynasty, at least at Alabama. Like a lot of people think, a lot of Georgia fans I talk to about this game say they want to beat Alabama, they want to win 3, but they want to roll over Saban to do it. And he's broken their hearts lots of times, so that's why I know where that's coming from.
Score prediction?
35-24. I think Bama takes an early lead. I think they get some explosives, and I think Carson Beck throws Georgia back into it. And like I said during my Kaylee's Keys, I think Georgia's going to put the ball on the ground and say, stop it, Bama, and I don't think Bama can.
I'm going to go 38-28 Dogs today. Now, guys, I know how I'm feeling. I probably know how you're feeling. Kickoff is coming up soon, so take the next hour, watch somebody else, have your drink, because that's more than everybody else in the stadium is getting. Enjoy it as much as you can because the SEC Championship is about to begin. I'm Kelly Mansell with Jeff Sentell. We thank you for joining us on the DawgNation Game Day Show, and make sure to check out Brandon Adams' post-game show immediately starting after the game. Thank you all for joining us, and I will give you one big go, Dogs.